But before that, I'm going to hand it over to Gretchen to talk through the two potential paths.
All right. So, as I said at the beginning of today, some of you have come today as part of a team, like all of you from Fargo. There are a couple of other teams in here too. And some of you came as individuals. And we just want to talk about how we're grouping you for the rest of the agenda. And also let you know that if my Zoom grouping was clumsy in any way, you should leave your breakout room and come back to the main room so I can put you in your right place. But I did my best with the information coming in the chat. But if you're here as a team, we want to put you in your team so that you begin thinking about your home context and the way that you want to make use of this at home. And if you're here as an individual, whether you are going to bring a team because you're working on getting a team, but you just don't have them here today, or you're here just to be learning, either way, we're going to put you in a group with other individuals for the purposes of thinking together about how you each might use these things in your different contexts, whether you plan to put a team together like in the next week or whether you're learning for future work. So just be aware that you'll be in one of those types of groups. And again, if we grouped you incorrectly, please, when you get to your breakout, if you look around and you're like, these people are all from Fargo, I am not from Fargo, please leave the breakout room and come back so that we can put you where you would like to be. Also, DPI staff, we've distributed you around the groups a little bit just so you can be there and listening in or helping if groups are stuck. And you all can be great relays back to us in the main room too. If you think somebody needs some help, come and get us and we'll come and join your breakout groups while you're working. Okay. So you're going to be asked when you get into your groups where you want to focus as a team. And this is one of those things for which there are both a million right answers and no single right answer. It's something you just have to sort out together. But we offered some suggestions here, right? Just given the common experiences we're all having in this time. You might be thinking about these kinds of things. You might be thinking about planning for summer relationship building and learning re-engagement as a community. You might be thinking about a strong start for the fall that helps heal whatever needs healing, that helps address whatever supports people need. And you want to do that in a way that is positive and collaborative. So you might be thinking about the fall and an opening to the school year. You might be thinking about your federal recovery funds. Pretty much everybody else I'm talking to these days is thinking about their federal recovery funds. And some communities are on purpose putting together collaborative groups with students and family members and community members along with the educators to make some decisions about how they want to use those recovery funds, especially given that they don't all have to be used like right away in the first year. So because it's a more long-term decision, lots of people are organizing that way. And also we think you might be really feeling like in the last year, you guys have built some new family and community partnership habits. Lots of folks that we've worked with this year, just in trying to be good partners, have figured out new ways to work together. And maybe those aren't like the standard way of working, but they're really good ways of working. And so maybe what your group wants to work on is what are the lessons we've learned already this year about how to be great partners and how can we make that our regular way of doing business? You may also have totally other things that you would like to focus on, and you may not know yet. It may be that what you want to focus on is the learners and families who have had the most difficult time, and you want to begin by getting some empathy interviews with them to find out where you should focus. That's okay too. But we'd like for you to have some time together talking about where you'd like to focus if you have some idea about that. And there's a little slide in our deck actually where you can input some information about that just so that we can get a sense together of where everybody is planning to focus in hopes that we find some places of connection with one another. Let me go ahead. So one last word about this before we go on. Coming back to the very beginning today and like why we're here. You could choose to collaborate on almost anything. Collaboration takes time and it takes work. It yields better thinking, but it also is a big deal to take on this kind of process. And I know that for some folks in schools, they're thinking, I'm just going to make a summer school plan because it would just be so much easier. I'm just going to make a summer school plan. But again, if the goal here is make a summer plan that's really good for those who most need some summer engagement and support. Make a summer plan that's feasible for teachers to pull off and carry off without coming into the fall completely burnt out. This is a way to plan for the summer, or a way to plan for the fall, or a way to plan for the use of funds that on purpose seeks to bring a lot of different voices in, not just because you're trying to have a complex process, but because the decision feels big enough and the potential impact is big enough that this kind of collaboration and co-creation is really worth doing. That process that you just heard Donnie speak about in his super slick NPR video, that process is worthy of the shared endeavor. So as you guys are thinking about where you want to focus, think a little bit about where can your collaboration have the most positive impact, because that's the goal.
Yep. And well, I'll also say that, and this is a theme that we're going to return to, but the how you solve the problem matters to this ultimate success of the problem, or of the solution. If you engage people as co-creators and as partners and learn from them and listen to their stories and actually believe them, you will make a better solution. And so that's the core of this, is that we want to help you do that, because we think that people close to the ground have a lot of insights, and it's good not to make assumptions about them. It's good to learn from them. And so we want you to choose a project and a topic that is really right for that, where learning and knowing the experience of people who understand the challenges of our current system, where that will really come out.
And again, if you're in one of the groups that's comprised of a group of singletons, you can each just be sharing your ideas about things where you think this might be applicable at home, whether you gin up a team and that gets going in the next week or so, or whether that's something further out. That's a conversation you can be having together with one another.
Great. So we're going to send you into some smaller groups to have this discussion. First, what is it that you think you might want to work on, given some of the list of the topics that we suggested or put out there as provocations in the last slide? And then based on what you know about each other and the liberatory design process, are there other perspectives and voices and experiences that you want to be a part of your team? And then you can start having the conversation about, well, how might we reach out to them? Because we certainly are going to help you not make inferences about what they want and think through the empathy interviewing process, but it's even better when they're on the team with you. Okay, because that's really when their insights really come to the forefront and they're part of creating the solutions.
And for the Fargo team, which is, again, robust, and we're so glad to have you. If you don't already all know each other, you might want to do some quick introductions, just because your team is big enough. And because I believe you have some students and some family members in your group, you might find that starting with them is helpful to the process, letting them share some ideas first. That is a suggestion, not a directive, but take it or leave it. Donnie, 15 minutes in these groups, correct?
I think that'll be good.
All right, I'm going to send you out again. And again, if I've made any mistakes, please don't be polite. Just leave that breakout, come right back and tell me where to put you, okay?
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. We know that was likely not enough time to really zero in on exactly what you're going to work on over the course of this project, and that is completely fine. Because if we go in thinking that we know exactly what we're trying to solve for without having heard from folks, that would sort of be defeating the whole point of this process. So we are going to invite you now into the first part, one of the core skills associated with the liberatory design process, which is this skill called empathy interviewing. And I'm going to talk you through this, and we're actually going to do some practicing too. So strap in, pay attention, and I'm going to read through just a quick description of what empathy interviewing is. Gretchen is going to be kind enough to model it for us, and then we're going to send you off into practice. So empathy interviewing is the process by which we understand a person's thoughts, emotions, and motivations so that you can determine how to innovate for that person by understanding the choices that that person makes and the behaviors that person engage in. You can identify their needs and then design to meet those needs. So the pictures that you see there on the right are not chosen from random stock images. Those are very strategic because empathy interviewing and the design process for how the lavatory light on your airplane was designed by asking people, well, what do you do when you try to go to the bathroom on a plane? They're like, well, I try to look back there and I try to see if there's a line and I can never tell if the door's open and I can never tell if there's anybody actually in the bathroom. And I'm so annoyed whenever I walk down there and there's somebody in there. I just wish there was a way to know whether or not the bathroom is occupied. And by listening to people's stories about trying and being frustrated and using the bathroom on the plane, they created this tool that's now ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Similarly, the mouse was designed through the design thinking process by saying like, well, there's all these things on the screen. I just don't know how to move them around. And I just wish, I just keep on using the arrow key and it doesn't go where I want it to go. And I wish there was just a way for me to, grab it and move it and put it where I need it to be. And by exploring people's frustrations with that in the early computing era, they created the mouse, which is now standard practice. Right? So the empathy interviewing process is a really important part of understanding people's motivations so that you can solve for their issues. And it's something that has resulted in what we've done here already today. And I'm actually going to truncate this just a shade. I'm not going to do this entering into the prompt, but this is from Sarah Medallin, who had participated in the PK-12 Alliance, who was your teacher of the year last year. And this is what she said after we did these empathy interviews. I thought I really knew the families at my school until I did empathy interviews. I discovered through this process that I had been making assumptions about families. I learned through empathy interviews about cultures and beliefs, about the hopes and dreams families have for their children, and about the obstacles they face. I realize now that to truly engage families, we can't make assumptions. We need to build true, authentic partnerships by listening, learning, leaning in, embracing families, and including them in decision making. And I would say that anytime you find yourself saying, well, I'm sure like this group experiences the problem in this way, or I'm sure that this is how they're thinking about it, that's probably a really good time to pause and consider whether or not you're making an unfounded inference. And this process of empathy interviewing is going to help you build that discipline. And so we just wanted to lay down a little bit of that conceptual foundation so that we're engaging in this thoughtfully. This is, again, like back to this diagram, this is part of the seeing the system and empathizing with the user, which is a core part of identifying the equity challenge. Okay, so I'm going to put this link into the chat. Hopefully you're in a spot where you can click on it. It's going to ask you to download. Ooh, I love what's in the chat. Thanks, Roberta. Yeah, I thought I knew, or I'm sure I knew. So click on this link and it should take you to a place where it asks you to make a copy. Just say yes. And it will create your own Google version of this. If you're on your phone, you could do it there too, but I'm actually going to exit this screen and I'll just show you what it looks like here. Okay. So it should bring you to a form that looks just like this. And I'm gonna just walk everybody through it really quickly because this is gonna be the tool that you use to do your empathy interviews. And it's what you'll send back to your team lead as you guys are getting ready for the next session that we have together. So first off, empathy interviews are meant to be anonymous. They're meant to be confidential. So one of the things you have to take care about is not including identifying information in your overall notes. So you can see here, Gretchen, who's in this call right now, this is a description of her that has a lot of identifying information. It's got the name of her kids, it's got where her husband works, and it's got where she's from and lives. That's not something you want to keep in your notes, but you do want important contextual information about what her perspective is. The fact that she is a white middle-class mother of a middle school and a high school student is important information. We just want to take out the names of her kids, and the fact that she lives in the city is important. Don't necessarily need to know that she lives in Denver. And so you can see here like what we've done in order to anonymize that description. Another cute thing that often happens in empathy interviewing is changing the name of the person and adding in a little adjective that goes with their name. So Gretchen is now Busy Betty. Okay. Who should you interview? Remembering that we want to address challenges in the system, you want to engage with a person who experiences that challenge most acutely. And sorry, Gretchen and Paula, would you mind, as I'm going through this, if people have like...
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you. Figured you did. Thank you. So you want to target folks who experience those issues so that you can better understand their perspective. Okay, so reach out beyond maybe your standard network and try to reach out to people who you know may have a different perspective than you, for whom you really want to explore and understand it more deeply. We've added in here some text to represent, or so that you can use to intro what this project is. So, hi, my name is blank. We represent this school or this district, and I'm a student, I'm a parent, I'm a teacher at that school. And we're talking with families and educators from across the community to learn how they experience school and learn, so far this year. And we hope to understand what you need for a successful year. So it's just asking them to be candid, giving them a little bit of context, building rapport and connection. So, not just randomly asking them questions and just letting them know that this is going into this kind of design process. The questions, you can read a little bit here about like how we think about it. The most important thing that we want to highlight for you, and we'll model this, is that empathy interviews are centered on stories. You don't ask opinion questions with an empathy interview. So there's a real difference between asking, what do you feel about school, versus tell me about the last time you had a really great experience at school. You're not asking about opinions, because they will just give you generalizations. They'll say, I like school. I like school because I want to be successful one day, yada, 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 yada. The same stuff I tell every adult who asks me this question. If you ask them to tell you a story, they will tell you more information, and you can ask about things that they were feeling or reactions that they had, and really just inquire more deeply. It gets a lot more interesting much more quickly. So down here, this is the note-taking space. So there are some starter questions and different questions depending on who you're talking to. If you're talking to an educator, if you're talking to a caregiver, if you're talking to a student, you can choose from each of the categories. To be honest, don't try to get to more than 2. It's just not. If you're conducting the empathy interview effectively, it's going to last about 20 minutes, and you're probably only going to get to 1 or 2 questions, because you're going to ask a lot of follow-up. So don't stress yourself out if you don't get to all of them. That's not the point. Okay, the point is to really get a solid story out of the person, and to keep asking questions until you really understand how they experienced that moment. Okay. All right. If you're needing some more like tips, there's a whole page at the very end about how to interview. One tip I often give people is, when somebody stops saying something and you're actually you weren't maybe totally listening, and maybe you kind of zoned out for a second, and you need to get the kind of conversation back going, there's 2 tips. One, you can just say, can you say more about that? It's great. Works every time. They just keep saying more. The other thing that you can do is repeat back what you heard them say, but with a slight upward inflection in your voice, like you're asking a question. So if they say, wow, yeah, I mean, my locker just wouldn't open. Your locker wouldn't open? Boom. They're just going to keep going, right? And so those two tips are what I would give you is like as you're going through the empathy interviewing process. Okay. They're also really great at cocktail parties when we do those sorts of things. Okay. Let's now switch gears and we're going to do a fishbowl. So I'm going to interview Gretchen. And I want you to pay attention to two things. One, what kind of follow-up questions do I ask? And when do I ask them? And two, how do I take notes? Okay? All right. Gretchen, are you ready? You're muted, so you're not ready. There we go.
I'm ready now. 100% ready.
I'll say I have not asked Gretchen in advance what story she's going to tell. I have no idea. And so this is true to life. But except that Gretchen already knows me, and so she's already somewhat comfortable. So I would start by saying like, hi, Gretchen, like, thanks so much for talking with me, yada, 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 pleasantries, 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 till she feels comfortable. And then I'm going to ask her, tell me about your students' best day this year.
I've got two kiddos, and the answer is different for each of them. My son Henry is in high school and was remote all year until about 3 weeks ago. And I think his best day of school this year was about the first or second day he was back in person. He has been, alone in his room. That's been school this whole year. He's been alone in his room. And he discovered being alone in his room that actually it's not just lonely, he also learns less. And so it has been hard. And so his best day was his first day back. He's now in the grind of being back. And I don't know that it's as magical now as it was a few weeks ago, but that first day back, I think was his best day. And my daughter has been in person for most of the year with some small interruptions. It's a much smaller school and they're able to manage some protocols differently early on. And I think her best day of school has been they created a structure. She's in middle school, and so they're not contained to single classrooms. And so to deal with COVID, they created a different structure, which is that they're doing like intensive study. So it's a little group of kids, 25 kids or something, and two disciplinary teachers at the same time. So like right now, she's with Spanish and social studies. Those are her two teachers, and her best like days, there were a series of them, is when she was in a music rotation. It was language arts and music. And it's interesting because she generally hates language arts, actually, so you would not think that that's a win. And she generally doesn't like music either. But the music teacher, whose name is Kofi, is just a magical music teacher, and helped her like enter that. It was the beginning of the year, and it was a new class, and she entered the class. She felt super welcome, and she's played guitar for years, but only plays in her room and never shares with anyone. And he had her playing at school every week. She was playing in class with somebody doing something, and it was just great to see her connect with other kids about something that wasn't so academic, actually, and have a lot of fun with that. So I think those were her best days.
Yeah, what was it like for you as a parent to see your son kind of seeming so lonely?
It was a real heartbreaker, because I mean, as a parent, it's hard for you anytime you have a kid who's sad and lonely. But it was also a situation where there was so little he could do or I could do to make it better. All we could do is just like be really understanding. But the fundamental things that were making him so lonely, we couldn't help very much. his realization that he learns by being in class with other kids, and learns so much faster. Like he had a bunch of reflections about math and chemistry in particular, where you kind of you're presented with some information, you do some practicing, and the way you know if you're on track is if the people around you find the same kind of stuff in their practice. And being so alone in his practice, and so having such a lag, between when he would find out if he was doing a good job or not, also just made him, like, in addition to being lonely, I think really insecure about his abilities as a student, which was a very new experience for him. He's always been a strong and confident student. And so I was just really sad while that was going on, and felt pretty helpless. Like he didn't have a way to make it better. And I didn't have a way to make it better. I started becoming his math buddy and doing some math together, but I was a poor substitute for peers in class. But that was like the best we could scrape together.
Yeah, it must be really tough to feel that helpless. Was there a moment when it felt sort of the most challenging, or where you felt like, wow, like I'm just not really sure what I'm going to do here?
Yeah, he late in the first semester, because he'd been struggling for so long, and because the channels to get help are also just really unclear for him in his situation. His teachers were teaching simultaneously in person and remote, which just meant their ability to be responsive to somebody who's struggling at home was just really low. They had a classroom of kids in front of them, or a small classroom, they were doing hybrid. This was a really small group. And so that, like, lag of feedback and that lack of responsiveness and not knowing if he was on track, he kept kind of thinking, like, these small assignments that I'm not doing well on don't matter. But then at the end of the semester, of course, mathematically that adds up on you. And he was in a panic about 2-3 weeks before the end of the term, not knowing what work was most important to do, how to get help and instruction where he needed it, whether doing that was even worth it. It was that feeling at the end of the semester where it's like, I could really work hard right now and it might make absolutely no difference. I might end up with the same grades I have, going forward. And what we ended up having a lot of conversations about was, that's when he discovered that learning by himself is really hard, that I talked about before. But we also talked about, like, what on earth are universities going to do with kids' transcripts right now? Like, such an odd situation. And so he was also trying to sort out, like, what does it mean? Like, I'm struggling so much. This hurts a lot. I'm on the brink of extreme failure. And
this is when it gets really hard. I'm going to pause Gretchen just for the interest of time, because she's like on a roll now. But can everybody give Gretchen like a visual round of applause? Yay! Thank you for sharing these really vulnerable stories about my family. Yeah, thank you. So I have these notes here, and so I want to invite folks to look at the notes and just think about what you heard in my questioning. What kind of follow-up questions did I ask? And when did I ask them? That was the task. So you can come off mute and share your thinking. There's really not a lot of wrong answers here, so don't worry about it. This is a learning space, right? Speak your truth. Experience discomfort. Not all at once.
So the one thing I noticed in your follow-up questions were mostly about how these situations impacted the emotional well-being or mental health of both the student and the parent.
Yeah, that's great, Matthew. Thank you. I tried to figure out, like, when was she feeling sad? When? At that point, so she was, Henry was starting to feel, she was reporting that Henry was starting to feel insecure. Now, the most natural reaction in the world would have been to try to solve the problem with her, right? Like, that's the human thing to do. Like, oh, you know what really make him feel better? Like blankety blank. Or you know what I would have done differently? Or what would you have done differently? You know, like that's great when you're having cocktails with your friend. It is not great for an empathy interview because I asked then, like, when did she feel sad and helpless? And that unlocked a lot more. Okay, great observation, Matthew. Thank you. Other observations about follow-up questions? What kind of question, when?
One thing I noticed, you did a great job in switching from daughter back to son. When you see that, hey, daughter is doing all good, so let's focus more on the son. And another biggest thing is, as a human being, as a sympathy and empathy both, we try to always look to solve the problem immediately. That's not the intent. And you stayed only on getting the details so you can see the problem statement. And because we may not have any solution that time, but getting the actual details of the problem, that's what needed. So you did great job in just poking question to get those answers.
Mhm. Thank you. That's great. Yeah, I think right. The her frustration and most sort of intensity was definitely with the anxiety that came out from having, you know, her son had this experience. Although there's a lot in there around like connecting with other kids in a non-academic space, like what that was like and what that felt like for her would have been also really interesting. I think so. To wrap this particular part up, when she was sad and felt helpless, I'm sorry, I just keep on saying that, Gretchen. I don't think of you as a sad and helpless person, but the in this case, you know, like feeling sad and helpless. If you look at the notes, when I asked her when did she feel most helpless, I wasn't trying to go into the future. I wasn't trying to problem solve. I was just staying in the story. I was just asking about her experience. And what happened then was that she told me about a system failure. Because I asked her about how she felt about something, she told me that her son's ability to get help from teachers wasn't fast enough, didn't get on track information frequently enough, and that caused him to go into a panic and not knowing what work was most important to do and whether or not he could even do it. So by asking about emotions, you actually get to this like huge structural issue like at the school, which you can then organize a solution around. Okay, so that's why we do empathy interviewing, is to get to that kind of thing. Okay, any questions? Because we're about to send you into some practice time. So, you know, now is the moment.
Donnie, should the Fargo team and North Fargo team be divided for this? Do you want them in a smaller group?
I was actually just thinking people do it in pairs.
Okay, then I've got to set up for that.
Okay. So, well, I am inspired by your confidence, everyone, into the empathy interview. So make sure that you have your document up in front of you. Okay, make sure you have your document up and your copy. And you are going to try to interview another participant in the session today. And we're just going to do 10 minutes. If you have a chance to switch, great. If you don't, no big deal. And ask one of the questions from the interview form. If you want to practice the intro part, kind of like saying your lines about who you are and what you're doing, that's fine. You don't have to in this case. But just practice taking notes and practice with asking the follow-up questions that stay on the emotion and stay in the story. Okay. All right. You might also notice, sorry, I forgot to ask this other question. I took very close to verbatim notes. I tried to capture as much of like direct quotes as I possibly could, because if you try to summarize, you're going to miss things. So don't do that. Try to take as quick a notes as possible. If you miss something they said and you want to stay in the conversation, remember the trick. Just repeat back what they said and with a question in your voice, or say, can you say more about that? Works every time. Just stay in it. Okay. Don't worry about it. You miss a little bit.
Okay, I've got us ready for pairs. These are randomly generated pairs. So you may or may not be with folks from your team. Although if you're from Fargo, there's a good chance you're going to be with somebody else from Fargo because of your numerical domination as a group today. All right, how long in the groups, Donnie? Remind me, please. Sorry.
Let's do just one quick round of interviewing. You're not going to be able to switch. Okay, so we need to come back and give people a chance to talk about who you're going to interview. So let's just do a quick 5 minutes.
Okay.
Do one person's the interviewer, the other person's the interviewee, and go. All right.
Everybody ready?
All right.
Excellent. Here we go.
Well,
we didn't have enough time, Donnie.
Oh, I know. I know. But what I'm trusting is that you got enough insight into how difficult it is. So, and I apologize for the timing. You're gonna get plenty of reps at it. And if you do a couple of these, you start to get a lot better. It's hard to start. So give yourself a little grace there. But I'm curious if folks had any sort of reflections. What was easy? What made it easy? What made it hard? Or just what made it hard?
I think for me, what made it easy is you're really genuinely interested in what the answer is. Mm-hmm. And you can't wait to see where it's going to go. Like that curiosity of what is it really? Does my thinking match with your journey? And then boom, and maybe not. So I don't know. I thought that would be kind of fun looking at the question.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, that's why sticking with stories is really important, right? So, because everybody wants to hear a story, but not everybody wants to hear, a big, long, diatribe about how they feel about public schools, right? But you definitely are interested in people's stories. Good. Okay, so in the interest of time, because we want you to plan enough such that you are able to go forth and conduct at least one, hopefully more, of these empathy interviews. So we're going to send you into your teams, and as you can see on the screen here, we're inviting you in to choose someone to interview from your community. And remember that you're aiming to understand the insights of people who are either constrained by the current system or not served very well by it. And if you need additional support on this process, we will have a check-in call on Thursday. And so you may want to talk in your groups about if there's anybody who wants to attend that. And we will be distributing the video from today, and it'll be broken up into chunks so that you can easily reference things that might be helpful to you. But we're going to send you into groups in order to discuss how you're going to proceed with the project. And yep, everybody's got the ability to edit. If we can ask one person from each group to be a little bit of a note taker for your group, and we're going to send you into that. Gretchen, how are you feeling about it?
Pretty good. I think I have to be essentially correct. Again, if I've made boo-boos, I'll come back and I will put you in your right place. I think I've got it. I think we're all making our way back here. So here's what we hope right now. We hope right now each of you has an idea about a person that you can reach out to and conduct an empathy interview. And we hope that you have your document ready to do that because you opened that link earlier, and that you're ready to give it a go. We have a little check-in call as a group on Thursday. It's only a half hour, and it really just is meant to be an opportunity to get some support with empathy interviewing, there are a number of reasons that you might want to do that. Your team might want to check in to just make sure everyone's ideas about who to reach out to actually played out. And instead of a person having to problem solve on their own, how to get a hold of someone if it didn't work, your team can support that process. It might be that Thursday you want to bring some folks in who weren't here for today's call, and we can offer some introduction to this, and as well as connect them to the video from today so that they have that to refer to get up and going. There may be just particular questions you decide you have about empathy interviewing, and you just want to hop in and get a little bit of help. So we have a quick call on Thursday. We hope that you'll all join for that, for whatever support you need. And before we end today, I'm just putting right now in the chat a link to a quick survey, and I really do mean quick. I'm not asking you for qualitative feedback on the day. It's been a long call already, but we do just want to make sure we have each team's, like that we know you're a team, that we have everyone's individual email address so we can put everyone's emails on the subsequent meeting invites for the series of these calls that are coming over the next few weeks. And wanted to ask sort of the status of your team. So, you know, did your team come complete today and you're kind of ready to roll? Did a small number of you come, but you want to add some folks on Thursday? Just there's a question about that, just so we can make sure we plan for you well and make good use of our time together. So please fill that out quickly. Thank you so much for all the time today. I can't even tell you how excited we all are. We've been waiting in anticipation for this for a long time. And so while this was just like 2 hours of an afternoon for you, this is a few months of us being excited that led up to today. So we're really glad to be with you all and looking forward to seeing you on Thursday. I will make sure if you fill out this form that your email address is in all the subsequent meeting invites, so Zoom and everything is really smooth for you. Okay. Donnie, Paul, or anyone from DPI, any quick closing words? If you have closing words, you're muted. Which is a
question about when our empathy interviews are due, when we usually have them done by.
Yeah, not this Thursday, but our next call, which is next, I think, Tuesday. Let me look real quick. Good question. That's a thing we could have definitely said before right now. Yeah, it's actually next Wednesday, the 28th is when we're hoping you have those back. Good question. Okay. Well, wonderful. Well, thanks everyone, and we will see you on Thursday. Looking forward to more.